I think I'm probably teetering between like, if you framed it up between 2 and 3, because we're just studying triggers like daily or like autonomous, like, okay, go run the script. And then there might be a agentic layer on decision making at some point. But like, can you back up and break down like what is the tech stack that you're building on, and like what are you setting up, or maybe even give an example of something you're trying to solve for a client?
For sure, yeah. I will add one pre-step to what I'm about. I'm going to answer your question. I'm going to say one thing first, which is I think the most important first step is to figure out what you're trying to do and describe that. I like to think of coming up with a job description of what is going to be built. And then within that, really think about the input. What is the context? What's going to be the input for each job? What is the overall general input? Like, first day training on the job, what do you need to know? Then what is the process? How does the sausage get made in the factory? That's a really important step. That's where your quality comes in and not just volume of slop. And then what's the output format, right? And so once you have those three, then you can start thinking about the architecture and how you're going to accomplish that goal and what tier level you need and combination and so forth. So with that in mind, let's say that, so we have one agent, for example, that does SEO geo research and builds content that feeds into a content pipeline with ideas and so forth. And so within that job description, there is a whole need to understand the context of the business at heart, but then also who are the competitors, what platforms do we want it to research every week? So we have it researching all posts from all competitors, plus Reddit, plus X, plus Substack, probably a few, and then just a general mentions search across the whole web of who's talking about what. All of that's compiled along with documents that describe the objective, and then all the Google Analytics is read, the Google Search Console, keyword performance, AI ranking performance is also tracked. Like all of that's input, and then from that, briefs are generated according to a format of how we want the brief to look. Those actually have strategies as well of what kinds of briefs, and then that's the ultimate output at the end of that agent is like, okay, here's the things that should be written. And we do also score them in terms of, I forget the name of it, but it's a scoring that we use to determine the tier 1 is that it's very novel, unique content, right? So it's authoritative. Tier 2 is the research is going to be novel. So no one's researched this before. Tier 3 is the framing is novel. So the research and the content isn't, but the way we're framing it is. And then tier 4 is what we call commodity content. And then depending on the client, that type of content may never go further, right? That's like a barrier, like, because that client doesn't want commodity content. Commodity meaning if it disappeared from the web, no one would ever blink an eye, right? That has no intrinsic.
Yeah. And so you're using like APIs, MPCs. There's kind of some new stuff that's coming out, as well as maybe some like a data lake, or even like a rudimentary Google Drive. And
so I can go to the technical stack next, but I think it's important to frame like what's the job first, because from that then you can start moving more and more into like, okay, the nitty-gritty. So in order to achieve that, there has to be a memory management system. So that could be a SQL database or Obsidian, QMD. It doesn't have to be RAG necessarily, depending on the volume. It could be just relational. And so there's that piece of it. We're building it on an EC2, like I said. You need to have a clock that generates the reoccurrence. That could be a cron job, could be OpenClaw. So from that clock, then that's creating the occurrence. You've got the memory then you have the skills that are developed in order to create consistency of behavior. And then there's a blog post on my website that talks about 4 things to really look at when you're building, which is, if I remember them all off the top of my head, ground it. So you want everything to be state driven. You don't want the AI model to just kind of remember what the state of something is and track it in a markdown file, right? You want to put it either in a JSON or a table or something for state driven decisions. You want to script it as much as possible. So you really don't want the AI to be thinking through how to do things over and over again. Even with a skill, it's still not, you're still going to create error rates because AIs are probability machines, right? So you want to create scripts that the AI actually triggers. So a skill triggers a script. The script is a set amount of code. The code runs, it's not AI anymore, and it's also cheaper, runs an operation, stores states into your data store, and the AI is just taking data back and then doing the only step that AI should be doing is the interpretation, right? How do I interpret this information? How do I make a qualitative decision in this case based on this data with this context? You do have to manage also context, because like the more skills you have, the less input tokens you have. So that's like an interesting balance right now in the ecosystem. But then, so that's let's see, the memory, agency, and then the skills and tools. That's really the main components of the system, right? And then from there, everything else is just driven by the input output layering. So for us, those briefs are an input to another agent, which then takes it further. And the ultimate final output is that it just publishes it on whatever website or social media platform is connected to the system, or newsletter, whatever. So that's the ultimate output. And then the input layer, that can be that research I talked about, but it could also be transcripts or video recordings, or it could be even other AI agents. So we've coupled also AI fully agentic systems that build software, and then those agents not only build the software, but write case studies about what they did, the problems they found, how they solved it, and so forth. All of those lessons learned get fed into the system that create novel content that is then tier one for novel content, right? Because like it's not just research anymore. It's not, and so you can actually have highly novel content going through your system end to end, which is like you don't even need a person anymore to do some of that novelty in the content, especially if it's like research driven or things like that.
Yeah, that is actually something we were talking about earlier today. Everybody listening, it's Monday, and so we were talking about how to pull some of that in, and we haven't quite figured that piece out yet. But that would be great to talk to you more about that, because that's actually what we're looking at. Is like, okay, the data and the data points we're producing, how do we turn that into case studies? Because that's unique data, right? It's data that we have access to, and so that very, very cool. Very cool. Well, I think that's what you talked about is where the market's going. And I think that a lot of agency owners are trying to kind of figure out that and are at different places and getting that done.